Should African history be that of the entire continental landmass, encompassing the regions both north and south of the Sahara Desert, and thereby including many peoples who are not demonstrably black? Or is African history essentially that of sub-Saharan or black Africa? If the latter, then should it encompass the tens of millions of Africans who have lived and died outside the continent, predominantly in the black diaspora created in the Americas and in Asia by the trade in slaves? Beyond the issue of inclusion and exclusion, there is a further question. Is African history in its essence the same as that of other peoples or parts of the world, subject to the same universal truths and amenable to the same methods of scholarly analysis? Or does the particularity of Africa demand that its past be studied according to its own logic, or even to the diverse logics of its myriad constituent parts? How African, in other words, is African history? Historians from both inside and outside the continent continue to debate these issues. Again, this may seem surprising. What does it say about the study of African history that scholars are divided over such fundamental definitions? A partial answer to this question lies in the fact that although African history is a huge topic, it is also a very new one. As a recognized academic endeavor, it has emerged only in the last 4 or 5 decades. In the 19th and the first half of the 20th century, as the modern discipline of history became established in Western universities, the general European perception was that Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, had no history to speak of. Not only were its societies regarded as primitive and unchanging, they were believed, due in large part to the widespread absence of literacy, to possess no collective historical consciousness. These racial perceptions were part and parcel of the era of European imperialism and were mobilized to justify the conquest and partition of Africa at the end of the 19th century. Despite the collapse of pseudo-scientific racial hierarchies and of colonial empires in the aftermath of the Second World War, doubts over the validity of an African history continued to be voiced into the second half of the 20th century, including, notoriously, by some leading European members of the history profession. The doubters were wrong about the absence of historical consciousness. African peoples have long had their own perceptions of the past and their own ways of remembering it. African history is not simply something that is done in modern universities. But the recent acceptance of the African past as a legitimate part of the academic discipline, like that of other colonized people, of women, of the poor, of the hitherto voiceless and the marginalized generally, has been a crucial breakthrough in the recognition of the diversity of human history. The invention of Africa. Before we begin to consider the contours of African history, we must first examine those of Africa itself. The two are not easily separated because to think about Africa as a place, we must think historically. In recent decades, historians and other scholars, many of whom are increasingly suspicious of received wisdoms, have begun to scrutinize and to unpackage a range of political, social, and ideological entities that for a long time have simply been taken for granted. Some of this unpackaging has been directed toward the ways in which societies and individuals have seen themselves in the world, and has sought to demonstrate that such visions are more complex and more prone to change than has been assumed. It has also been concerned with the ways in which certain cultures have seen others, especially with how Europe, or the West, has perceived the peoples of Asia, Africa, the Americas, and elsewhere. In addition to complexity and change, the emphasis here has been on how these perceptions say as much about the viewer as the viewed. They can also be seen to have been shaped by the dynamics of imperial power. A groundbreaking work in this vein was Edward Said's Orientalism, 1978, which examined the European vision of an exotic, decadent, and corrupted Orient, including North Africa. Said has been much criticized for constructing, in turn, an inverted Orientalism, or Occidentalism, by assuming the existence of a monolithic European worldview. Yet his thesis